Why do you always keep those things, Maria? They're broken, useless, the little boy muttered, kicking a snapped toy car across the polished floor. The maid bent down slowly, her calloused hands picking up the tiny car, the wheel dangling by a thread. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned the toy over in her hand, eyes soft, voice trembling with a hidden truth she never dared to share. Because, Nathan, she whispered, her tone filled with more meaning than the child could grasp. Sometimes broken things just need a little time and love. Before they can be whole again, the boy frowned, confused before rushing back to play with his sister. Maria stayed on her knees, clutching the toy as if it carried the weight of her own heart. She looked toward the tall windows, the city skyline glittering beyond them, and murmured to herself, one day, maybe they'll understand. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. But Maria's thoughts weren't still. Behind her quiet eyes was a storm of memories, sacrifices, and a secret she guarded closely, a small closet upstairs, hidden away where every broken toy, every forgotten doll, every cracked puzzle piece was carefully tucked. Waiting, she was only the maid in this grand house, a place where wealth glistened in every corner, but she had made it her secret mission to rescue what others discarded. Not just because of the toys, but because each broken thing reminded her of her own life, discarded by people who thought she was too ordinary, too invisible. But here in this house, she refused to let brokenness mean the end. Maria, a sharp voice pierced the air. It was Elizabeth, the billionaire's daughter, only 7 years old, standing at the top of the stairs with her hands on her hips. Why are you holding trash again? Daddy says we don't keep things that don't work. Maria smiled gently, hiding the sting of the word trash. She rose to her feet, dusting off her apron, and replied, "It's not trash, Miss Elizabeth. Sometimes the most precious things are the ones nobody else sees value in anymore." The little girl rolled her eyes, but her gaze lingered longer than usual. There was something in Maria's voice, something steady and warm, that made her hesitate before running off. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Maria crept quietly through the silent halls. Her footsteps were soft, careful not to disturb the billion-dollar silence that filled the mansion. She carried with her a bag of the day's forgotten items, a cracked porcelain teacup, a stuffed bear missing an eye, and the little toy car Nathan had tossed aside. Up the narrow service staircase, she went to the old closet near the attic. With a gentle push, the door creaked open, revealing shelves and boxes overflowing with the hidden treasures of brokenness, dolls with stitched arms, cars with glued wheels, puzzles carefully pieced back together. It was like a secret museum of forgotten childhood. Maria placed the day's finds inside and stood there, her eyes glistening. "One day," she whispered, "they'll see that love can make broken things beautiful again." What she didn't know was that her life and this secret were about to collide with the very man who had built this empire, the billionaire himself, in a way that would change both of them forever. The following morning, the children were restless. The rain pounded against the glass walls of the mansion, and they begged their father, Mr. Jameson Cole, for something new to play with. He was a man who wore his wealth like armor, tall, sharply dressed, with eyes as cold as the steel of the skyscrapers he owned. To him, toys were disposable. If broken, they were to be replaced, not fixed. "I'll have the driver bring you new ones," he said curtly, scrolling through his phone, his attention fixed on a deal that could buy 10 more houses like the one they lived in. "But Daddy," Elizabeth said, folding her arms, "Maria says broken toys can be fixed. She always says they're still special." Jameson lowered his phone slightly, arching a brow. "Maria says that, does she?" The maid, standing silently in the corner, froze. She avoided his gaze, but she could feel it, sharp, piercing, questioning. "Yes," Elizabeth went on, her voice stubborn. "She says broken things need love. Is that true, Daddy?" The billionaire's jaw tightened. His world was built on numbers, profit, power. Love had never mended anything in his eyes. It was money, replacement, moving on. Yet the innocence in his daughter's question forced him to pause. He looked at Maria, finally addressing her. "Is that what you've been teaching my children? That broken things are worth keeping?" His tone was calm, but beneath it was an edge of disdain. Maria swallowed hard. For a moment she considered staying silent, but the children's eyes were on her, wide, expectant, hopeful. She spoke softly but firmly, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Yes, sir. I believe broken things, broken people too, are never beyond repair. They just need someone willing to see them, to care enough not to throw them away." The room fell into silence. The billionaire stared at her as if she had spoken a foreign language. Elizabeth and Nathan leaned closer, sensing something unspoken in the air. Jameson said nothing more, but in his heart a seed had been planted, a seed he would resist, deny, and eventually be forced to confront. Because soon, very soon, he would discover the closet. And when he did, the world he thought he knew would never be the same again. The storm outside had not eased by the next evening. The mansion stood tall against the pounding rain, but inside the atmosphere was heavier than usual. Jameson Cole had barely spoken since Maria's words the day before. He wasn't the kind of man who entertained sentiment. Yet somehow her gentle defiance lingered in his thoughts like an echo he couldn't silence. Maria sensed it too. Every step she took through the marble halls, she felt his eyes on her. Not in cruelty, but in silent calculation, as if he was trying to figure her out. She did her duties with the same quiet grace as always, hiding her heart behind small smiles, but inside she wondered if she had gone too far by speaking so boldly. That night after dinner, Elizabeth pouted at the table. "Daddy, can we play with you? Please, just for a little while?" Jameson, seated at the head of the long mahogany table, adjusted his cufflinks, his gaze flicking to the towering stack of documents beside him. "Not tonight, sweetheart. I have work." "But you always have work," Nathan muttered, his small voice barely audible. Jameson heard him, but said nothing. His silence weighed more than words, and the children's shoulders sank. Maria, clearing the dishes quietly, glanced at the scene. Her heart pinched at the sight. She wished, just for a moment, that he could see what his children truly wanted. Later, when the children had been tucked into bed, Maria returned to the little closet in the attic. She carried with her the toy car she had mended earlier. The wheel, once dangling, was now carefully glued back into place. She placed it beside the teddy bear, whose button eyes she had sewn the night before. "Good as new," she whispered softly, running her hand over the patched bear. "Maybe even better." Unbeknownst to her, footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy, deliberate, approaching. The doorknob twisted slowly. Maria froze, her hands still on the shelf. The door creaked open, and there he was, Jameson Cole himself, standing in the doorway, his eyes narrowing at the sight before him. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to fall silent. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low but cutting as his gaze scanned the rows of shelves. "Why are these here?" Maria's breath caught in her chest. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The secret she had guarded for years, this sanctuary of brokenness, was now laid bare before the very man who despised anything imperfect. Jameson stepped inside, his shoes clicking against the wooden floor. He picked up the teddy bear, holding it like it was something foreign. The stitches were uneven, the button eye mismatched. "You kept this?" His tone was unreadable, balanced between disbelief and contempt. Maria swallowed, her hands trembling, but she forced herself to speak. "Yes, sir. I kept them. Every toy the children discarded, every broken piece. I couldn't throw them away. They still had worth." Jameson turned sharply toward her, his brows furrowed. "Worth? They're useless. The children don't want them. Why waste your time?" Her eyes glistened, but her voice grew stronger. "Because, sir, children don't always know the value of what they have. And because—" She paused, drawing in a shaky breath. "I know what it feels like to be discarded, to be seen as nothing more than something broken." Jameson froze. The words struck deeper than he expected, pulling at something he kept locked away for decades. But he quickly masked it, his jaw tightening as he placed the bear back on the shelf. "You're a maid, Maria," he said flatly. "Your job is to keep this house in order, not play savior to forgotten toys." Maria lowered her eyes, the sting of his words pressing heavy on her chest. But still, she stood her ground. "With respect, sir, this is not about toys. It's about your children, about teaching them to see the value in things, and in people, that others might overlook." His eyes narrowed again, searching hers, as if trying to decide whether she was naive or wise beyond measure. Before he could reply, a small voice startled them both. "Maria?" They turned. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, holding her blanket. "Why are you up here? And Daddy, what are you doing here?" Maria's heart raced. She quickly knelt beside the girl. "Go back to bed, sweetheart. It's late." But Elizabeth's gaze wandered past her, into the closet. Her eyes widened. "You kept them?" She stepped inside, her tiny hands brushing against the mended toys. "This is where they went." Jameson stiffened. "Elizabeth!" But the girl's face lit up with wonder. She picked up the little car, now repaired, and gasped, "Nathan! Nathan, come look!" Within moments Nathan appeared, bleary-eyed, his curiosity pulling him into the room. When he saw the shelves, his jaw dropped. "You saved them all." Maria's voice trembled as she answered, "Yes, I did. Everyone." The children's eyes shone, their laughter filling the once-still attic. They clutched the toys, hugging the bear, racing the car across the floor as if they were brand new. Jameson stood at the doorway, silent. His children, who had been restless, unsatisfied, constantly craving more, were now completely absorbed, completely joyful in the very things he had dismissed as worthless. He didn't understand it, and yet something inside him shifted as he watched. Elizabeth ran to him, holding up the teddy bear. "Daddy, look, he's fixed. Maria made him better. Isn't he wonderful?" Jameson looked down at the bear, at his daughter's glowing face, and for the first time in years he had no ready answer. The storm outside raged on, but inside that tiny attic closet a different storm was brewing, one that would force a man who thought he had everything to face the truth of what he was missing. Maria met his gaze, her eyes steady, her voice soft but sure. "Sir, sometimes the things we call broken are the very things that teach us what it means to be whole." And though Jameson didn't respond, the silence between them spoke volumes. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel in control. He felt something else, something he couldn't quite name, but one thing was certain. This closet, these toys, and this maid had just cracked open a part of his heart he had long believed was sealed forever. The next morning, the house was alive with an energy Jameson hadn't felt in years. Laughter echoed down the grand staircase as Elizabeth carried her patched-up teddy bear everywhere, while Nathan zoomed his glued-together toy car across the marble floors. Maria moved quietly in the background, as always, but the children's joy was impossible to hide. Every time Jameson glanced at them, he saw their eyes glowing with something he couldn't buy, something he didn't even know how to give. And every time he caught Maria watching them with that quiet, unwavering smile. At breakfast, Elizabeth climbed into her father's lap with the bear tucked under her arm. "Daddy, Maria fixed him. She saved him. You never saved any of my toys before." The words cut deeper than the little girl knew. Jameson shifted uncomfortably, his arm tightening around her. "That's not my job, sweetheart. Daddy makes sure you have everything you need." Elizabeth tilted her head, frowning. "But sometimes what we need isn't new, Daddy. Sometimes we just need someone to care." The room fell still. Nathan nodded, his small voice adding weight to the moment. "Maria cares." Jameson's throat tightened. For once, the billionaire who always had an answer had nothing to say. That evening, when the children were asleep, Jameson found himself pacing near the attic stairs. Something drew him back to that closet. He opened the door again, stepping into the small, hidden sanctuary. He looked around, really looked for the first time. Every shelf told a story. Every stitch, every glued crack, every carefully repaired piece was a quiet testimony to patience and love. These weren't toys anymore. They were proof of something he had long forgotten. Maria appeared in the doorway, surprised to find him there. She hesitated before stepping inside. "Sir?" He turned to her, his voice low. "Why did you do all this? No one asked you to. You could have just thrown them away." Maria's eyes softened, and for the first time she let her truth spill. "When I was a child," she began, her voice trembling, "I had nothing, not even toys. I remember picking up scraps from the street, broken things other children threw away, pretending they were treasures. And every time I told myself, if someone could love even broken pieces, maybe someone could love me too." Her eyes glistened as she looked at the shelves. "So when I saw your children discard these toys, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't let them believe that broken things have no value, because people grow up carrying that belief, and they start to think they themselves have no value when they break." Her words hit him like a blow to the chest. Jameson's mind flickered back to his own past. His father, strict and unyielding, who taught him that mistakes were weakness, that flaws were shameful. He had built his empire on that belief, discarding anything or anyone who didn't meet his impossible standards. And now here he stood, staring at a closet full of broken things that had been made whole again, and realizing for the first time how much he had been missing. His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Maria, I never knew." She looked at him, her face calm but resolute. "It's never too late to learn, sir." For a long moment, the silence between them was heavy, but different now, less like a wall, more like a door beginning to open. The next morning, something astonishing happened. Jameson joined the children on the floor, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. He sat cross-legged beside Nathan, helping him push the little toy car along, while Elizabeth giggled as her father used silly voices for the patched teddy bear. Maria watched from the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears threatening her eyes. Elizabeth looked up at her father, smiling wide. "See, Daddy, it doesn't matter if they were broken. They're still ours. They're still special." Jameson pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his voice thick. "You're right, sweetheart. Sometimes the most special things are the ones we almost threw away." From that day forward, the mansion felt different. It wasn't the new toys, the endless luxuries, or the polished marble that made it glow. It was the laughter, the lessons, the small acts of kindness that Maria had quietly planted like seeds, now blooming in ways even she hadn't imagined. Jameson never forgot that closet. In time, it became more than a place for broken toys. It became a reminder to him, to his children, and even to Maria, that brokenness is not the end. It's the beginning of something new when met with love. And though he never said it aloud at first, deep in his heart he knew. The maid had saved more than toys. She had saved him too. Sometimes in life we rush to throw things, or people, away because they seem broken. But just like those toys, a kind word, a gentle hand, or a little patience can bring them back to life. Next time something feels too broken to fix, pause and remember Maria's closet. Because often, the things we save end up saving us too. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Black Saga. For more powerful stories like this, drop a comment with your thoughts, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today.